month with a lot of intentional camera movement. And who else did we have? Olga last year, the really dark, lots of movement. That was great. So, and then we had Douglas Marshall, the owner of the Marshall Gallery in Los Angeles, who only represents people with very unique voices. So what I wanted to do is talk a little bit tonight about what we mean when we talk about artistic voice for a photographer, and then tell you a little bit about my experience in developing my own artistic voice, and what influences I've had. And not all of those influences have been in photography. And then finally show you a little bit of that work and then present a challenge to you, for you as club members, how we might go on that journey together and maybe stay connected via some other meetings or certainly on social media. Oh, all right. There we go. Okay. Oh, okay. Yep. I got to go back. I have to. Sorry, there we go. Perfect. Okay. So, I am an educator, and as an educator, I always try to make sure people understand what I'm going to teach or going to present, and then I leave it up to you at the end to figure out whether I was actually successful. So, what I want to do tonight is make sure you have or try to present a good idea, a broad idea of what an artistic voice is and how we develop that. Show you my journey, and then see if we can't come up with a way to work together to challenge each other and continue on those journeys. So here's Lisa Congdon is someone who's been influential in my reading. She is an artist, an illustrator, and a writer, award-winning, and I think she's Portland-based. And she has written a book called Find Your Artistic Voice. And what she says is that's kind of an odd phrase to use, finding your voice, because that implies at some point you're going to arrive, you will have found your voice and you'll be done with the process. And she says that's not actually true. Your voice is always evolving, based on a number of factors, your experiences, your new influences, your interests, your skills. So we never really arrive at our voice. We're always learning it, refining it, and maybe changing it. So that's I think a really important thing to remember. Like, we won't ever be done with this. We're always going to try to figure out who we are and what we want to present as a photographer. Is there, how can I get that right there in the middle? Is there anybody, can I move? Oh, look at that. It's not. Oh, okay, perfect. Okay, so here's a quote from her book, Speaking Your Truth. And when she talks about speaking your truth, she's really talking about your voice. Your artistic voice is your own point of view as an artist. And I don't know if we all think of ourselves as artists, but if we're creators, we're artists. And I think that is really helpful to think of yourself that way and embrace that identity. So it includes your particular style, things like your own color palette, symbols, lines, and markings, your skill, your mediums, your subject matter, and the consistency with which you use all of these. It reflects your unique perspective, life experience, identity, and values, and it's a reflection of what matters to you. So ultimately, it's what makes your work yours and sets you apart and makes it different from everyone else's, even from artists whose work is similar. Your voice is formed over time through continuous experimentation and intentional practice, and from following spurts of information and intuition around the path, along a path of development. And I would also say sometimes we're really successful walking down those paths, and sometimes not so much. We make a lot of mistakes and we learn a lot of things from that experimentation. Okay. Okay, now I don't want to leave. I think that had something to do with it. Right here. Oh, there we go. Right. So, most artists, she says, are busy simply attempting to produce satisfying work or make a living. Don't let that scare you. That's a professional artist, but remember, we're all artists. So we're really busy that we forget that ultimately we're making work to communicate our own version of the truth or our own voice. So we make work that matters, that mirrors our own deeply held ideas about the world. And sometimes those deeply held ideas might be
Carol, can you hear me?
Nope.
I can't hear Carol. Does anybody else hear Carol?
I can't hear Carol either.
Okay, we need, put a chat in, let her know that you can't hear her, okay?
Okay.
Already did.
Oh, good, thank you.
We can't hear Carol, David.
Anybody know any good jokes?
I'm gonna try leaving the meeting and then rejoining and seeing if that'll help. Oh, wait a minute, I can't. I'm the host or co-host. Okay. I sent a text to David. I'll send a text to Kevin.
I did too.
I'm already talking with Kevin.
Oh, good, thank you.
Kevin's saying that you can hear Rags. Can you?
Yeah, I can hear you. So
Yeah, I can hear you if I unmute, but I'm hearing nothing from anybody in the club.
correct. That's the same for me.
Okay.
Is this, should we be pausing or?
Oh, I'm hearing Carol now. I am hearing Carol. How about the rest of people online? Can you unmute and let us know if you can hear? Alexa, can you hear us? Can you hear
I
Carol?
can hear.
I can hear too.
Okay.
I
Okay.
just let Kevin know we could hear.
Great, thank you. So I'm not sure when we lost you, but we were talking about these components of art and which ones, just for the people in the room to name a few that they feel like they really, their work really does reflect those, that they focus on those and their work is, it's clear in their work. So anybody else in this room or anybody else online want to comment about your work and say which of these things I feel is really reflected in my work?
Self-discovery, resolution of internal conflict.
Wow. Thank you. That is great. Thank you, Ted. So less about more about emotional ideas and less about visual ideas. Thank you. Beth.
I'm really concerned about how objects are placed in space and the sense of balance, color, texture, integrating that whole, and whether it's designing jewelry or planting a garden or doing textile work, having a sense of how that object is going to relate to the rest of the environment is crucial for me.
So very three-dimensional, very spatial. Thank you so much, Beth. Anybody else here in the room or online?
Yeah, so
Oh, what to leave out?
you got such a small image. When you think of the size of the universe, the small image you have is inconsequential. It's statistically meaningless.
Absolutely.
So for a long time, I worked with a lot of people at different jobs, almost like Walter Mitty, trying them on. And I enjoy taking industrial portraits, like pictures of firemen at work or somebody carving out a totem with a chainsaw or just an artist, and I just stop and start taking pictures. I just want to work on how can I make it unique? Because you see a lot of industrial portraiture, but the next step is figuring out how to be unique about it.
Fantastic.
Yeah, good.
Anyone else?
Yeah, somebody like Paul Arno Rose has a very strong narrative.
Mm-hmm.
The canoe, the chair.
Mm-hmm.
So there's also things, some people had the gnome years ago.
Anyone online? Okay. Thank you. It really warms my heart to hear you reflect on your voice in your work. So, thank you.
Yeah, texture is another big one of mine too.
Yes, texture. Thank you. So in her book, and this is a distillation, of course, it is a short, relatively short and easy read, and even this is a distillation. But Lisa has some tips for finding your own truth and your voice in your work. So the first thing she talks about is finding your style. And what she says, the style, having one style isn't critical, but so I think there are several people in here who have a few different styles. I know I do some very abstract work. I do some reflection work. And it isn't so much that we can't explore multiple styles, but it's that we are consistent with the way we present a single style. So again, these aren't rules. These are things that this author who is trying to talk to us about our voices is saying, if you want to develop your voice, here's one way to do it. Have a style and be consistent with it. Another way is to focus on building your skills. So those technical skills, how do you use your camera? How do you use your lens? How do you change the settings to accomplish what you want? All of that, mastering your equipment is also important. And then consider your subject matter. Do you choose subject matter consistently within your style? And she said, this is perhaps the most defining aspect. When we see portraits, do we look at them and say, ah, I know who did that portrait? Or when we look at the landscape, yep, I know whose that is. Or when we look at some animals, we say, I know who's that, who took that one. So, and then look at your chosen medium. So she's writing this book for all kinds of creators, all kinds of artists. But in this case, we're all photographers. And so for me, the important thing is not, do you have the latest Canon or Nikon, or do you have, 4 different DSLRs and how many lenses? What's important is that you have a tool and you learn how to use it. The tool is not as important as your own voice and how you use it. So that's how as she talks broadly about using, like if you're a visual artist, you can use paint, but you can also use string and paper and glue and paint and all kinds of other things. Are you a master of the tools that you select? David?
Yeah, Brooks Jensen from Lenswork magazine.
Mhm.
He has a book. It was co-written, I believe, but his famous statement is, "It's not about the camera. It's about what you produce, what you see, how you produce it." So yeah, not about the camera. Then again, what camera you do use, know how to use it well.
Yep.
So yeah.
And I would acknowledge also, if we have a particular vision for what our work would be like, not all cameras will necessarily fulfill all visions either. So I don't want to dismiss the need for, if you are looking at macro photography, there's certain equipment you need to do it to accomplish that style. Above all, Lisa says, be consistent. So if you have, and I think Steve Engel, I think of his work, and the animals, they're not all the same animals, but we know the clarity of his work, the focus, the lighting. Can always, I know when Steve has taken the animal photo, and that's for me very distinctive about Steve's work. Not that I'm putting you in a box or anything, Steve. And then consider your story. She said, your voice is your story and it's important. So don't ever diminish your own experience, your own viewpoint, your own values, your own story. It is important and it's reflected in your work. Yes, David.
I just wanted to say, if anyone has questions or comments, raise your hand. I'll get you the microphone. Okay. So this should be interactive. Correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
absolutely.
But so everybody can hear online and that, just, raise your hand and we'll get you the microphone. So
absolutely.
thanks.
Thank you for that reminder. As we proceed now I'm going to talk about some influences on my work, and I'll say these are influences on my work. I'm not suggesting that these are important for you or would even be of interest, but I think for me, I look at this and I go, boy, there's a really wide range of art forms that have influence and continue to influence what I'm interested in photography. It's not always this, but I would say this represents kind of my predominant style. And so these ideas or influences would, the principles of art and design, and they were on an earlier slide when we talked about line, shape, form, texture, et cetera, and how those are represented in other media. I really love to go to art museums and I love to look at all kinds of things. And when I'm looking at it, I always think about how does that influence me, my ideas, and my own expression of visual art. A Japanese idea of wabi-sabi, poetry, especially haiku, which is also Japanese, and then we'll stray into to a really interesting, not overly popular idea of mindfulness and contemplative photography. So, wabi-sabi, is there anybody in here who knows the concept of wabi-sabi? One person? Okay. Anybody out there want to raise a hand? I keep looking at the screen as if that's where you are. You're actually right here. I can look right here. Okay. So wabi-sabi, I am presenting some ideas interpreted for the Western mind by an architect and an artist named Leonard Cohen. He's not the only one. These couple of books that he's written, Wabi-Sabi for Artists, Designers, Poets, and Philosophers, and Wabi-Sabi Further Thoughts, are pretty popular. And the problem is, here in the West, we like to put words to everything, and we think those words are going to help us understand. We're very, very intellectual and very verbal, and we don't think so much in ideas. And words aren't often used in Japanese culture to describe wabi-sabi. It's more of an idea and a concept. So I'm going to toss out some of those. And I want to acknowledge, like right off the bat, that to be talking about this, I know nothing about Japanese culture, language, history. So I do not want anyone to think that what I'm saying is the gospel about wabi-sabi, and want to be really careful about cultural appropriation. What I understand about wabi-sabi influences me. So this author describes wabi-sabi as a comprehensive aesthetic system. So already, like, what is that? Addressing, okay, then it gets really good. The ultimate nature of existence, sacred knowledge, emotional well-being, behavior, and the look and feel of things. Okay. All right. So now there are some quotes that help me understand this a little bit better. Wabi-sabi is not found in nature at the moment of bloom and lushness, but at the moments of inception or subsiding. So at the extreme ends. And greatness exists in the inconspicuous and overlooked details. Beauty can be coaxed out of ugliness. And in fact, another idea is that beauty doesn't have any existence in and of itself. Wabi-sabi is the beauty of things imperfect, impermanent, and incomplete. And if any of you know the pottery repair method of kintsugi, when you use pottery and when you break it, you don't throw it away in Japan. You have it repaired with gold. And that is just an expression of the appreciation and the beauty in something well used and loved and repaired, and the value of difficult experiences. Wabi-sabi is the beauty of things modest and humble. It is I can't see that. I've got something covered on the screen. Can't. It is, go ahead. The beauty of things unconventional. So, for me, this is a major influence. And I also go back to when I was much younger, before I was doing much photography myself. And I have an older sister who would admire photographs, and some would be blurry, and the kids are running around and you see all this movement, but you don't see eyes, you don't see eyelashes, you just see this whirl of, and she would love them for the moment that they captured. And as someone who hadn't done much photography at the time, I'm like, what is wrong with her? That's a terrible photograph. And now I go back to that, and those are some, it doesn't matter if you don't catch the great moment, or if you don't catch it in a great way, in a clear way. What matters is that you caught the great moment and the essence of the moment. So that's what I think of when I think about wabi sabi. The other thing that influences me is haiku, which is for me a form of poetry, Japanese poetry, that gets at the essence of things and observes things in their simplest state. So, for example, as if nothing happened, the crow and the willow. A poet by the name of Isa. It became a rain heavy enough to wash the ants away. So do you read that and you go, I know that rain. I know exactly the rain that is. And that moment where you're observing in a field, that tree, and just a simple event that happened, and you just appreciate the simplicity and the peace of it. So, R.H. Blythe was a Western scholar who studied haiku. And so here's where it's going to get a little, we're going to drift into the Eastern side of thinking, and definitely not the Western side where we are. So he said, we grasp the inexpressible meaning of some quite ordinary thing or fact hitherto entirely overlooked. Haiku is the apprehension of a thing by a realization of our own original and essential unity with it. It moves toward that idea of mindfulness and our presence in our environment. And he says, we are reunified with all things since one flower is the spring. A falling leaf has the whole of autumn, of every autumn, of the eternal, the timeless autumn, of each thing and all things. And so for me, that idea that you can capture the essence in a photograph is just thrilling to me. And I was hoping Daniel Fortune was going to be here tonight, because we talked a bit about haiku, and he actually sent me some that he wrote. And if he were here, I would ask if I could share them, but I won't do that. But he's a writer in addition to being a photographer. So Henri Cartier-Bresson wrote, technique is important only insofar as you must master it to communicate what you see. In any case, people think far too much about techniques and not enough about seeing. So this whole idea of seeing what's in front of you and really taking time to look at it and appreciate it in its simplicity is what I love. And then it brings us kind of to the last influence, major influence for me right now, and that's mindfulness. And there are a lot of definitions. Mindfulness is a probably 400 BC central tenet of Buddhism. And I'm not saying, again, I'm being really cautious here and telling you what I read. Not that I'm any sort of, I don't want to, I would only, if I said anything more, I would only misrepresent many of these ideas. I really want to be aware of that. But he says, mindfulness means paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. So just to look at something and observe. It's not good or bad or right or wrong. It just is. John Kabat-Zinn is a retired professor emeritus, Massachusetts School of Medicine. I think. And so expanding on that idea of mindfulness in photography, and this really gets, this pushes the boundaries of what I can actually comprehend, and I really like to think about it. So contemplative photography, careful observation, there's a school of photography, Mixed Song Institute. Anybody ever heard of that? It's a particular, the authors of one of these books teaches in that institute, and it is very much, it is something that I'm going to guess most of us bristle at, and I bristle at it like I did my sister, saying, look how beautiful, like, we, look at their hair, it's out of focus and it's flying all over him. She's out of her mind. But that's exactly what this is, capturing what is and nothing more and nothing less. So what the authors of this school of photography talk about is that thinking is not done before and after you capture an image. It's done at the moment you're capturing the image. So there isn't a lot of planning, and there isn't a lot of post-processing. There is looking at something and capturing it in the moment you see it in a way that it moves you. And there are three, I have to refer back to my notes, because this really is, I mean that when I say it's kind of at the limits of my understanding and how I can apply this. The language is even unfamiliar. So there are 3 steps if you're following the school of photography. One is you experience a flash of perception, a simple, vivid, and direct experience of something. And that's not just your eyes running over something, but you really connect, and then you pause and you go, oh, let me look deeper at this. And then you really look and you really experience it. And that's called visual discernment. And then in a term, you form the equivalent of the perception. That is, you capture the image. And the aim is to produce an image that is the equivalent of what we see and experience. So, and the last idea, I think, is a really powerful one. In The Power of the Final Photograph, and this is from, I don't remember which book, I'm sorry. The power of the final photograph comes from joining clear seeing with simple, straightforward expression. And I take that back. I did note that. And that's The Practice of Contemplative Photography by Andy Carr and Michael Wood. And what I'd say is all of these references, I did, and if anybody checks, if you check email as obsessively as I do, you might have seen that I sent one final notice, and attached, there is a link to the presentation if for any reason you want to look at it, at your own pace. And there is also a page of references. So I have links to this information if you want to follow up. Where's that book? Let me read more about it. Where are there some web pages? So this is the part. Anybody have any thoughts that you'd like to express? Friends online? Absolutely. The moment can be prolonged, and and you end up with something different than what you thought you were going to do because you stayed present with it. Yep. Yes, discovery. Yep. Thank you, Ted. Okay. So now I'm going to show you, this was, for me, this discovery was 6 or 7 years ago. And one Thanksgiving, it's really quiet at my house, and like whatever food needed to be chopped was chopped, and it was sitting there ready to be, the heat turned on, and food in the oven, whatever. I'm going for a walk. And so I went for a walk, and I was so struck by this puddle and these boxes and trees. They're actually big, like fruit boxes, bins. I don't know. What do you call those big fruit boxes in orchards? Fruit boxes? Apple boxes? There we go. And I was just so struck by this. So this is the reflection. And I didn't think about turning it around then. I have since thought about turning those things around to change the perception. But this was the first thing. This was my first ever post on Instagram. I'm standing there, I took this picture and I'm like, wait a minute. I think I have an Instagram account and I think I could post this. And I just stood there by the side of the road and stumbled through it. And I went, Pam, I'm doing this again. So this was the first thing I did. And I had thought about a 365-day project many times. And I always thought about it in April or July or October, never on January 1st. Because isn't that when you start a 365-day project? Not necessarily. As it turns out, sometimes it's Thanksgiving Day. So that is exactly what I did. I'm like, I am going to do this. So I started out doing, there's a huge variety of what I did. And I think I learned some things about my style and I pursued like some to the point of tiresomeness, the same object over and over and over again. But you know what? It was my project. So if people got tired of seeing the posts of the same abstract glass, that would be their problem. So
Steve's bench.
right. Yep. So, at about this time, my mom had died several years before this, but I had acquired some of the things that were really special that I remembered from my childhood. And so I took, there are a couple of images here that came from her estate. And this is where I first really started. Like, I couldn't figure, I had no light box or nothing to make those things. I didn't really understand it would be okay if they didn't look beautiful. But instead I went the abstract route. And this is one of those old fashioned, nut toppers where it's got the glass bulb on the bottom and like a little chimney. You put the nuts in and you crank it and it grates them. And that's looking down at the grate. The item on the right there is a salt shaker. And it was on the table every day that I lived at home for whatever it was, 19 years. And the item on the left is a table. It's the base of a table that was in my grandfather's nightclub in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, in the early 1900s. And so there it is. You can see, I guess it was iron, a heavy son of a gun. And I still have it. And I got underneath it. There it was sitting in my kitchen and I just got underneath it. There were still cobwebs. I didn't do anything. I just got close and looked at the lines and the angles. And when I see that, that's a memory for me. Of these things that were really quintessential in my growing up. These are all me trying to be funny, 21st century water vessels. They are water bottles that you buy in the store. And the green and the orange one, I have no idea where that water bottle is. No idea whatsoever. Many of these, I wish I had taken notes. But I do know I took that in my office one night. It was dark. I'm leaving. And I'm like, I have to post a picture. I am going to post a picture. I don't know. Did I find paper? I don't know what I found. I found the water bottle and that's what I captured. So some of these were happy accidents. And in capturing happy accidents, I went, oh, well, I'm going to look into that. And the others came subsequently. Another one. So another thing that I did during this 365-day project is challenge myself by finding a vase or a glass that had a lot of form, shape, dimension to it. And I would just play with it with lights and put it on its side and, put it in the dark and use flashlights, or I use colored paper. I did tissue paper. I did all kinds of things. So the green one on the left is a vase, and the purple colored one on the right is a drinking glass, and which I broke putting it away. So that's that. A butter dish on the right, and that same vase on the left. This is more recent, but it really reflects this idea. This is just, it was a pandemic photo, and it was something or things reflecting on my wall in the hallway. I wasn't home during the day, like ever, until the pandemic. And then that's all I did. And then one day, I mean, look at that light in the hallway on the wall. And I'd never seen anything like it. That is virtually as shot on the wall. And for me, it looks very dimensional. And it really, this one really embodies when you stop and look. I could have walked down the hallway, said, oh yeah, the sun's out today, and kept walking. But I didn't. I stopped. It caught my eye. It was one of those moments of perception. And I stopped and I went, that's only going to be there for about 10 more minutes. And then it's going to be gone, because that's how fast the sun moves past that spot in the hallway. So here, I'm just going to buzz through these. The one on the right is what I captured, a reflection. And the one on the left is kind of what I was perceiving. And then I just want, that feels a little cluttered to me, but I wanted to juxtapose those two things and then, okay, give you just a clear view of that. And then the rain on a road, what I captured on the right, turning it over, what I saw, I don't know, a landscape, a cityscape. And there it is by itself. I love this one because it's the Boardman River, and it's not often that the Boardman is that still when people are around. That was downtown. I have no idea where, but you would be surprised how much it looks like it's the wilderness when you're looking at the reflection. So what I saw on the left, again, turning it around, and there it is by itself. The leaves provide such beautiful texture. I think people pay for layers that have texture like this, and they put them on top of their photographs. But if you find the right pond with the right dead leaves or the right things floating on top, you get all this texture in a reflection, and that's what you end up with. Out at Bowers Harbor, this single tree, embodying that simplicity and the beauty and the impermanent. So, what is the best way to become a better photographer and find your artistic voice? Anybody? Yes. Do it. Just get out and shoot. Do it. You get out there, you do it, you show up, you're tired and you do it again. You look at your work, you learn from it, you get out and you do it again, and you do it again, and you learn from it, and you just do that over and over again. If you want to develop your voice, you do the same thing. If you want to be a better technical photographer, you do the same thing. So whatever your orientation is, I want to do better with my lenses, or I want to do better with bokeh, or I want to do better with whatever it is. Or I really want to learn how to express this appreciation I have for, name it. And how are you going to represent that in your work?
I mentored somebody one time, excuse me. And, we were doing all kinds of things, old buildings and, everything. And I had mentioned, why don't you try portraiture? And the thing was, well, it means lighting. It means, I says, well, not necessarily. It means good light, but you can use natural light. But the interesting thing is, once this person did that, they realized that they liked the interaction with the subject, the people. And that was the photography that became the photography that actually made a living from that photography. So that's just experimenting and trying all these different things. But as it turns out, it wasn't the going out and being by yourself or whatever. It was actually the interaction with the
Right.
people that was the most enjoyable part of the photography. So that's where they wound up.
You don't know where the
Yeah.
practice is going to take you.
Right.
You don't know. And that's that suspending judgment. Just see it and just be curious about it rather than judge it. Just let it be. Right. I have some photographs like this. I tossed this in because it is also something I did during my 365-day project, but it doesn't really represent all that other stuff I talked about, which was find stuff in its natural environment and appreciate the mess that it is. This was very carefully, I don't know how I figured it out. I don't know why I did this originally, but I have a handful of these where various papers that people who are putting together photography albums, like the black there, like in the upper left, is kind of a velvet-like paper. I do not know how I got that shiny stuff. The otherwise, it's layered papers with some kind of reflective surface to create that symmetry. And I did a few of those. So that's not the go find stuff and just contemplate it and be it. This was real. So you don't have to have one style. You can have more than one style. But when you're doing it, like, you just work for that consistency and really develop that style. I tossed that in for that example. So, okay. This isn't a decision we can all make tonight, or maybe it is, but what if there was an interest group here and we did a 365-day project? Too much? All right, a 52-week project. Still too much? 30 days. It doesn't matter, but you commit to this thing and do it. And you can do it by yourself, or you can do it together. You can do it online. What I ended up doing was posting every day on Instagram. And then once a week, I posted a 7-photo collage on Facebook. So I had 52 posts on Facebook of 7 photos each. And then, all the single photos on Instagram. And that's how I did it. For me, social media was really important because it held myself accountable, and I learned a lot. It wasn't just the rule as I have to post a photo. It was like, I'm really learning a lot, and I'm going to push through because I don't feel like doing this today. It's raining and I'm on my way home. And when I get there, I just want to eat and go to bed. But no, look at the lights reflected in the road. Pause for a minute. You can stop and do that. So it doesn't have to take a long time. It can. You want to devote 2 hours on Saturday to Saturday's photo? Go ahead. You want to just snap it and crop it and be done with it? You can do that too. So here are several links. You can Google this and there are all kinds of how-tos. These are the ones that resonated with me. Everybody's got a list of the 365 things you should photograph, or, the 52 things you should photograph. And some of them are like boring to me. So if following a list helps, there are lots of lists. If you don't want to, don't. There's a video clip of a guy just going like, this is how much fun I had. Some articles there. We can do an interest group. We could do that because we've had interest groups before. That would be one thing we could do. Tell TACC what you're doing on Facebook, and hashtags, like, great. We could follow each other even if we don't share a social media page. If we all use the hashtag TACC Photo Challenge, anytime you search that hashtag, you get everybody's images. So that's another way to stay in touch, even if you aren't physically in the same place. Isn't it? To see other people's work? Yes. Yes. And get ideas. You go like, oh, I've walked by that thing 100 times. I never knew that was there. I never knew it looked like that. Any other thoughts? Friends at home? Right. So, Ted is here saying like some days he goes out and can't find a single thing and thinks the world's going to pieces, and other days filled with inspiration. Do you think those days that you don't find something to photograph are days when you're not really seeing like, those influences described, contemplative photography or, whatever, like, what do you think is the reason for that?
Brainwaves, I guess.
Okay. Right.
Another thing-
Right. Yeah.
Another thing that happens to me, I get stuck. I'll take a photo that to me, I feel so smugly proud of this photo. And then after that, I think, Jesus, I can't top that. How do I start?
Oh, right. Okay. So here's what I have a response to that. And that is, if you're an artist, you have to be okay with being vulnerable, because your stuff is out there and people are looking at it. And I don't even care what it is or how good it is. There are some people who aren't going to like it. And you are not going to want to hear what they have to say when they walk by it. And so if you're going to be an artist, you have to be okay with that and be vulnerable and say, yeah, it's not going to be my best. Artists are a sensitive lot, aren't they? That's right. Yeah.
You'd have to believe in your work. That's all. Do what you believe in and what you like.
Right. It's your story. Like she said, it's
Right.
your story. You are in that work.
When I was, I had mentors, and it was, sometimes I'm like, well, how do you decide what to take a picture of? And he just, this one professional photographer says, look up, look down, look left, look right, turn around. He says, there's always something to take a picture of.
Mm-hmm.
He says, get close, use a telephoto lens. He says, you just have to start shooting. You'll find something.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, then after you look at some of those pictures, now with film, we had to wait. With digital, we can see it right away.
Right.
But he said, a lot of times you will then look at those and then you go back sometimes to that same place or situation.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll actually form something then because of what you shot before that gives you then, prompts an idea.
When you said, the guy said, turn around, look left, look right, turn around. It does remind me of a photography challenge that I read about, but this I never had the courage to do, is identify a single spot. And for X time, this was probably a year, but wow, you'd have to find a really special spot. Every day at the same time, you go stand in the same spot and you take a photograph every day for a year. Talk about challenging your vision and creativity. Deadlines are good.
Before the deadline.
Yes. That'd be me. Yes. Any other?
Anybody else? Marilyn? Nothing?
Anybody out there? Gosh, thank you. Steve, you got something great.
Many times when I get stuck
Mhm.
and I don't know, how to make that image better, I don't try to. I just go out and try to find something different and see how good I can do with that image. Just-
Like that one that is bothering you just has to be okay like it is, right?
Or come back later and try again, but
Right.
don't dwell on it.
Yep. Very good.
Yeah, another good example would be like street photography. You say you find that spot
Mm,
and you like have a view down this street or an alley and you go back every day.
mm,
And in a way, you're never going to have the same picture
ever, right?
because there's always going to be movement, something else going on, different people.
Right.
So yeah, it's, it's how you work it.
And even if no one is in that alley and you go back at the same time, the sun is in a
Yes.
2-minute different spot. It is going to be a different photograph.
Sequences.
Mhm.
Again, always don't think of just the photograph. Consider sequences.
Mm,
As the sun moves,
mhm.
what does it change in that scene?
Right,
So,
right.
yes.
Gosh, thank you all so much for letting me share, what I feel in my own artistic practice, pretty passionate about. I really appreciate your attention. There's my email. You have that handout in a TAC email, and you have a link to the presentation if you just want to look at it or not. Just delete it too. That's okay. So anyway, thank you all so much.
Thank you, Carol.
Welcome.